So when I was asked to speak, I assumed it would be about social interaction or relationships. Again, I know how this goes. When I'm approached to speak, it's usually about how we, my wife and I, have managed to have a successful marriage. It is the focus of our family blog, and everybody is interested in her story. They all want to hear how she manages with a partner who has some quite extreme idiosyncrasies. But I was actually asked to talk about health. So I'm a health and exercise scientist. That's what I do for a living. I represent my employer as an expert in nutrition, exercise, and all manners of physical health. I've conducted primary research. I've written hundreds of published articles online in magazines. I speak in videos all the time, and I've even been on TV many times discussing this topic. But I've never actually been asked to speak about it in relation to autism. In fact, I've never really thought about it because I've always felt that in this regard that autism is actually a benefit. So this gave me the opportunity to research and learn a lot of things myself. So in preparation, it became really clear that I'm very good at detailing the problem, but not so good at coming up with solutions. So I hope many of you are already familiar with some of this information, and maybe my experience can give you some ideas. But I truly believe that everyone's path to physical health is unique. I have been trying to figure out for myself nearly my entire life, and I have more questions than answers. So you need to find out what works for you and use your autistic superpowers to live it every single day. So my goal here is not to educate you about obesity or the lifestyle behaviors necessary to avoid it, but simply to inspire you to prioritize your physical health. If you can leave this room understanding the importance of your lifestyle behaviors, I'll consider this a success. So as we go through this presentation, don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions or make comments, because this is more a learning experience for me than it probably is for you. So this is me at about 8 years old. I've actually had a lifelong struggle with weight problems. There are not a whole lot of pictures of my childhood. There's many reasons, but one of those is because I was very uncomfortable in my own skin. So by the age of 11, I was already over 200 pounds and was showing signs of being pre-diabetic. In my teens, after seeing the effects of unhealthy behaviors on many of my family members, I decided that I was going to learn everything there was to know about nutrition and exercise, and I was to become a subject matter expert. Pretty much overnight, I completely changed my lifestyle, and soon my body and overall health changed as well. This commitment ultimately determined my education and career path. I studied nutrition for my undergrad, and then I got a master's degree in exercise physiology, and finally a doctorate in health science, where I focused my research specifically on obesity. I've also attained a number of professional certifications in nutrition and exercise. I've worked with collegiate and professional athletes as a strength coach and nutritionist, and then I've worked in public health. Today I have the coolest job in the world. I represent doTERRA as their health and exercise scientist and spokesperson. So for 3 decades, my life's focus has been physical health, and I'm honored to have the opportunity to share some of what I've learned and some of my personal experiences. So according to former US Surgeon General, Dr. Richard Carmona, obesity is the single greatest health crisis facing the future of the US and of the entire human race globally. According to the World Health Organization, 39% of adults worldwide are overweight, which technically means more than 20 pounds over ideal weight, while 13% are considered medically obese. Although progression has slowed, rates of obesity have grown exponentially since the 1970s. It's actually tripled since 1975. So there are a myriad of reasons why. Many of them are politically focused, and I'm not going to discuss them at this point. But the reality is we exist in what is known as an obesogenic environment, one where it has become increasingly difficult to develop healthy lifestyle habits that promote healthy weight management. Go ahead.
Oh, you have a question?
Yeah.
What are the reasons, and this is just a question,
Uh-huh.
what are the reasons high fructose corn syrup?
Absolutely, yeah. So not to go into it a lot, but in 1973, there actually was a farm bill passed, which made subsidies for things like corn and soy very available. So at that point, those started being injected in all the foods that we currently eat, which is one of the reasons why our dietary behaviors have changed so much. So what exactly is obesity? It's the hot term in the medical world in my area of health science, but most don't know technically what it means. The general threshold is a basal mass index of over 30, but even that number has a number of different factors. If you have a large frame or are muscular, those measurements may be completely irrelevant to you. So if you are concerned, you should really speak to a medical professional. In scientific terms, obesity simply means the condition of being medically overweight. It's the point at which excess fat accumulation significantly impacts your health. So it is estimated that nearly half of premature deaths in the US are associated with excess weight in some context. Almost every member of my family who has passed in my lifetime did so due to complications from conditions which were linked to excess body weight. Currently, my stepfather has diabetic retinopathy. He's literally going blind due to type 2 diabetes, and he's also nearly lost his foot several times. As we speak, he's in the hospital awaiting another eye surgery. He's just turned 50, but due to decades of not practicing healthy lifestyle behaviors, his body simply doesn't heal. He's almost completely dependent on my mom. So despite being in good health in their youth, my 4 siblings all currently have health conditions that are associated with excess weight, and none of them has yet even reached age 40. So it's something that's very personal to me. Obesity has also been shown in research to be one of the primary factors in many psychological conditions, including anxiety, low self-worth, depression, and others. Interesting enough, research suggests that more than 2/3 of those who are medically obese do not know that they are obese. And it's estimated that nearly half of those who with associated conditions such as type 2 diabetes have yet, in fact, to be diagnosed because they don't get regular care. The first step in being healthy is being informed. You can't fix or improve what you don't know. So I urge everyone to develop a relationship with a healthcare provider, someone who has a vested interest in keeping you healthy and happy, and get annual preventative care. Even though my life revolves around health, I found out the hard way this past year about the importance of regular medical care. Had my boss not urged me many times to see a doctor, I very well might not be alive right now.
How do you check your BMI?
BMI is simply a proportion of your height to your weight. It's not the best metric, but it's very easy. A better metric would be like body composition, so checking like your body fat.
How do you do those? How does one check their body fat percentage?
So there's a number of different ways. The most accurate way is called a Dexa Scan, and they're usually at hospitals. They have one at the University of Utah. BYU has what's called a bod pod, which is similar. At a hospital, they might be able to do like a skin fold test where they get calipers and basically pinch you.
How much does it cost?
A Dexa Scan is really expensive. It's probably like $100. Bod.
Like a group of 3 though for like
Yeah.
75.
Yeah.
75.
Bod pod at BYU is a little bit cheaper, but if you talk to your doctor about it, like your physical, he can probably do something better than BMI. So in researching for this presentation, I came across article after article discussing the relationship between neurodevelopmental disorders and obesity. I shouldn't have been surprised, but I actually was. I simply have never thought about it in this context. Growing up and even well into my career addressing obesity, never once did I have an inkling that ASD and autism spectrum disorder individuals have much higher rates of obesity and comorbidities. These statistics were simply not available until the last several years. But in evaluating all the factors, it makes perfect sense. We are simply at an increased risk for physical health complications, especially those associated with obesity. So individuals on the autism spectrum are also at an increased risk for a number of weight-related health conditions, specifically metabolic disorders, like metabolic syndrome, diabetes, fatty liver disease, hypertension. And this is likely a combination of both nature and nurture. Those on the spectrum have several inherent genetic factors, but also many characteristics of those on the spectrum promote unhealthy behaviors which further increase risk. It's a health impeding cycle, but we can get out of this cycle. Next one. So everyone's probably heard this idiom in some context, but genetics load the gun, but lifestyle behaviors pull the trigger when it comes to your physical health. So our natural metabolism, hormone function, immune system, gut microbiome all play a role in how easy or difficult it is to manage our weight. But in reality, less than 5% of the population has health conditions which promote unhealthy weight to the point that lifestyle behaviors can't really overcome them. So it may be more difficult for you than others. It definitely is for me, but you can control your own behaviors. Therefore, you can design your life around either promoting health or impeding it. So why are we inherently predisposed to having high risk for obesity? So those on the spectrum have a spectrum of risk factors for obesity: genetic predisposition, strong predilection for disordered eating patterns, disinterest in physical activity, medications, and associated factors like sleep and gastrointestinal issues. Yes, sir.
A question. I was not really aware that ASD had specific genetic associations.
Yes, I'm going to talk about those real quick.
Okay. Does it, and what are they? What can you go get a genetic test and identify?
So that's really it's really easy to do afterwards. But again, these are just they can kind of measure risk. They can't tell you whether or not it is for that specific individual. So there's absolutely a genetic component to weight management. One of the most powerful risk factors for obesity is genetic propensity. So research has shown that the weight status of your parents is by far the single greatest determining factor in your own future weight. This is partly due to the lifestyle they model, but also has a lot to do with the genetic code that they imbue in you. So modern science is beginning to discover that many of these same genetic biomarkers associated with risk for having autism spectrum disorders are also associated with increased risk for future obesity. There is a strong correlation between parental obesity and childhood obesity, and autism may be an interrelated byproduct of this association. So obese women have an increased risk for birthing autistic children, as excess weight in pregnancy leads to high levels of certain immune system molecules that produce antibodies, which may be associated with autism. It is believed that this is due to immune system irregularities. So my mother actually has an autoimmune disease. She has rheumatoid arthritis. There is a strong research-based link to autoimmune disorders and autism. I don't think it's a coincidence that I myself actually have an autoimmune disorder as well. Mine is called Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which happens to cause extreme hypothyroidism, which is also a common cause of unexplainable weight management issues. So women with weight issues often have immune system-related concerns, which are risk factors for autism spectrum disorders in their children, making their children more genetically inclined to have weight issues of their own. It's a cycle of disordered health. So after getting diagnosed and getting medication figured out for my autoimmune disorder, I actually lost almost 20 pounds in about a week earlier this year. Likely not a coincidence, but Utah has among the highest rates of autism spectrum disorders in their population and thyroid-related conditions. So there's a very strong connection between autism spectrum and autoimmune disorders. Okay, next one. So a 2010 study found that individuals with the deletion of 25 genes on chromosome 16 are at an increased risk for autism, various developmental delays, and obesity. A large deletion on chromosome 11 that is associated with autism and ADHD also falls within a stretch of genes linked to obesity. Yes.
I don't know what those chromosome things don't mean anything to me. Can you
Okay.
explain that?
So basically, there's various genetic markers. So there's specific deletions in these markers that are inherent that are associated with risk. So these specific chromosomal deletions can affect everything from from metabolism to hormones to influencing regulation of satiety, insulin resistance, energy levels, and many other physiological concerns that can influence weight management. Okay, next one. Yeah.
So sort of going back to my previous question, when you say deletion of 25
Yeah.
Chromosomes, are they a specific 25 or 25 out of any 25 out of 5?
No, there's very specific ones. So if you have that specific deletion, it's not a guarantee that you will have either one of those conditions. It's a risk factor.
Okay.
Yeah. Some of these deletions are also one of the primary genetic markers of Prader-Willi syndrome, a disorder which is characterized by constant insatiable hunger. Not surprisingly, there are a number of associations between autism and disordered eating. Surveys suggest that up to 90% of individuals on the autism spectrum has some form of abnormal eating behaviors, with binge eating being the single most common. This is likely related to dysfunction in the biological mechanisms which mechanically regulate fullness. Other studies have found a distinct association between autism and chronic inflammation. So chronic inflammation, metabolic issues, and obesity are all interrelated. This inflammation may also be linked to hormone issues, particularly thyroid, which I discussed earlier, and insulin resistance and receptor dysfunction. So there's no wonder that those on the autism spectrum scale have higher rates of diabetes and thyroid conditions, because genetically they're predisposed. Okay, next one.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm just curious because I also have Hashimoto's, and my son is autistic. Could you be a carrier and not have, could I have that gene deficiency that then I pass on to my child?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a very, very strong risk factor.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
You're talking about the deletion of certain chromosomes and genes. Is there a trigger, would diet be a trigger to offsetting some of those irregularities in the chromosome?
I don't know that there's any research on that. That's
You're saying it's not, if they have those deletions, it doesn't guarantee that they have a certain.
No.
So there may be a trigger that you're not aware of.
There may be. That's called epigenetic triggers. So we think that possibly could be, but we don't really know for sure. So studies show that individuals on the autism spectrum eat a narrower range of foods and have a significantly higher rate of eating disorders than in the general public. People with autism are sensory defensive and routine oriented, resulting in refusal to try alternate food choices. We also have higher rates of preference for low nutrition and energy dense foods, and lower rates of fruit and vegetable consumption. So we all have sensory issues, and one of the most common are food related, particularly the texture of food. Those on the spectrum have far higher rates of what's called avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, which has implications both for restrictive food disorders and binge eating. Furthermore, having studied eating behaviors in children, one of the most studied concepts is that eating behaviors are generally developed very early in childhood and rarely change throughout your life. So ASD individuals simply accept a narrow range of foods and have more difficulty trying or accepting new foods later. Binge eating disorder is one of the most common disorders associated with obesity. It's characterized by regular events of consuming extreme amounts of food. So those on the spectrum have much higher incidence of various risk factors, including emotional and psychological issues that are associated with binge eating. Furthermore, there is a physiological component due to impaired sensitivity to external stimulation. So those on the spectrum often eat at a faster pace and have more difficult time gauging satiety. Their mouths simply work faster than the mechanical receptors in their gut. So I have a lot of personal experience with this issue. In fact, I have been in counseling for it in the past. Unable to totally get rid of this concern, I found several workarounds in my own life to help me with this particular issue. For instance, intermittent fasting. I do a lot of intermittent fasting so that my feeding periods are much more limited, so I have less opportunity to eat too much. Go ahead. So in short, characteristics associated with autism spectrum disorders make it more difficult to develop and maintain healthy eating habits. So we'll talk about physical activity for a little bit. Individuals on the autism spectrum spend more time in sedentary activities. Even at an early age, they show less interest in active play than their neurotypical peers. And they have an affinity for screen time, especially video games. So sedentary activities are a significant factor in obesity risk. Increased screen time has been identified as one of the primary factors in the growth of obesity over the past 4 decades. Numerous studies have shown that those on the spectrum have a higher predilection for screens compared to their peers and less interest overall in exercise. And there's a lot of different reasons for this. Next one. An enjoyment of physical activity is one of the hallmarks of physical health. And it is simply, for a number of reasons, less common and more uncomfortable for those on the autism spectrum. This has a number of implications for weight management and overall physical health. There's also a pharmaceutical factor. So psychotropic drugs that are used in ASD therapy have been shown to directly induce weight gain. Yes?
Can aromatherapy or diffusers contribute to weight gain?
That's pretty interesting because that's actually my area of research. So I'm one of the research scientists for doTERRA. There is no evidence that inhalation of essential oils has any effect whatsoever on stuff like that.
Sorry.
Yes.
Sense that maybe when you smell it, make you think you want to go eat something?
No, it's just, I mean, sometimes
Yeah.
if you, no, okay. That's just my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
As far as I know, there's no technically an essential oil that generally induces that, makes you want to eat. Individuals on the autism spectrum have much higher rates of psychotropic drug use in ASD therapy and to address associated psychological issues such as depression and anxiety. Many of these pharmaceuticals have cardiovascular, endocrine, and metabolic side effects which directly induce weight gain. So while they are important for your psychological and emotional health, they do come with some physical health side effects. And then there are some related complications. So individuals on the autism spectrum also have higher rates of related complications, specifically sleep difficulties, gastrointestinal issues, and psychological issues. One of the hottest areas of health science right now is how sleep impacts physical health, and specifically weight management. I mean, it does so in a variety of ways, by increasing cravings for junk food, decreasing energy levels, and influencing metabolism and hormonal regulation. Gastrointestinal issues are often related to chronic inflammation and endocrine problems. So research suggests that the cause of the higher incidence of gastrointestinal issues like IBS and GERD may be related to the overall health of the gut microbiome. Recent studies have seen some significant differences in the composition of the gut flora of those on the spectrum, specifically that we have less diversity of our gut microbiome flora. Yes?
Is that why a lot of people maybe gravitate towards certain likes or dislikes, is because they have a more sensitive gut?
Possibly. So the gut microbiome, like the composition of our gut, is an area that we know almost nothing about, but that we're beginning to realize has an influence on a number of different health factors.
I'm curious, I don't know if you can answer this,
Yeah.
but could the gut microbiome be less diverse because of the less diverse food intake?
I've never really thought about that. So, the studies have been done in adults with autism. So that's very possible. Yeah. Yes.
When it comes to autism, you're more likely not to go to some place if you got sick from it. If you say because you have autism, you're more likely not to go back to that place than you would if you were neurotypical.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you associate that experience with uncomfort.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore you don't want to experience that again, so you don't go back to it.
Yeah. So yeah, there's definitely some factors in why we have a different gut microbiome. For instance, the best foods for improving the health of your gut microbiome are fermented foods like sauerkraut and yogurt, and I know that's one thing that is very common, a very common dislike in those on the autism spectrum. Like I refuse to even eat those foods. So I actually take probiotics because of that. Huh?
Sounds like a weird question. Pistachio.
Not that I'm aware of, no. So research has shown that those on the autism spectrum experience sleep-related difficulties at a much higher rate than their peers. Surveys suggest that about 80% have different sleep difficulties. There's a number of different reasons why, and a number of ways that it negatively impacts your physical health. One way that it can negatively impact your physical health is, that people on the autism spectrum are influenced by sleep is we actually have irregular circadian rhythms. So studies have noted a link between children on the spectrum and irregular production of melatonin. And melatonin is a hormone that helps regulate sleep and wake cycles. There's also a high prevalence of psychological conditions related to abnormal sleep patterns, again, like anxiety and depression. And then another one of the side effects of psychotropic drugs is sleep difficulties.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I have a lot of questions.
no problem. That's what I'm here for.
Melatonin. If you take melatonin, can it impede your body from producing melatonin?
Absolutely. So your body has all these like endogenous mechanisms which control melatonin. So if it gets used to external sources, I'm not saying it's going to shut it down, but it can over time it can definitely influence it. Yeah, my experience taking melatonin was really bad.
I never
Yeah.
have taken it.
Yeah.
Question.
Okay, next one.
Thank you.
Welcome. Sleep deprivation refers to getting under 6 hours of sleep in a night, which is the baseline recommended for overall health. While you can occasionally function fine on less, if it becomes chronic, it can cause major issues in all components of your life. Sleep deprivation decreases activity in your brain's frontal lobe, the part of the brain that controls decision making and impulse control. So if you are chronically sleep deprived, you're more likely to make bad decisions late at night and the following day. This is especially relevant in our eating behaviors. So other research has shown that sleep deprivation negatively impacts motivation to exercise performance, and exercise recovery. If you are sleep deprived, you're less likely to exercise, and even if you do, the performance and recovery will be hindered. Sleep deprivation also influences hormone regulation. In regards to sleep, specifically your insulin receptor function and cortisol regulation. It makes it more difficult to maintain a healthy metabolism and to manage weight. So chronic sleep deprivation has direct physiological impacts and makes adhering to those healthy lifestyle behaviors significantly more difficult. So the connection between autism and obesity starts in the womb and sticks around through the entire lifespan. Obesity is heritable and has many genetic components linked with neurodevelopmental disorders. Those on the spectrum are more likely to be overweight in early childhood and develop disordered eating and activity behaviors.
If you were the person to could you break the chain trying to be healthy yourself? So you yourself have a history of obesity in your family. Since you decide to be healthy, can you break that heritable chain?
You can absolutely make a difference. That's about all I can say. Autistic teens are then less likely to outgrow childhood weight problems due to strict adherence to those unhealthy behaviors which they developed earlier in life. And then those on the spectrum are less likely to make lifestyle changes in adulthood to address those issues later in life. From a nature and nurture standpoint, those on the spectrum simply have a more difficult time with weight management than their neurotypical peers. But more difficult doesn't mean impossible, and we can make consistent progress with a few simple lifestyle changes. So let's talk about breaking the cycle. So what is the one thing that those on the autism spectrum don't like? What don't we like? Change?
Breaks in routine.
Yep, breaks in routine, exactly. So I'm sure my wife would love to tell a number of stories about how unbelievably resistant to change I am. And I'm sure all of you in this room would probably relate. While being so rigid and routine-oriented can make behavioral change difficult, it can also be your greatest asset in maintaining your physical health. So neurotypicals have an inherent desire for variety and change. We don't. It's a significant challenge for my wife, but I've always considered it my superpower. Once I have focused on changing a habit, which science says usually takes about 66 days, not the popularly used 21, it is usually just a part of me. It's automated. I don't even have to think about it anymore. Physical health is all about developing specific healthy lifestyle behaviors and getting into a routine, doing whatever promotes health over and over and over again. So use your propensity for routine to develop a lifestyle around healthy behaviors. Next one. So when I first changed my eating habits at about the age of 16, I would eat chicken, broccoli, and kidney beans for every single meal. I literally ate nothing else for years.
Where'd you go to eat?
That's interesting because I actually would take food with me to restaurants when I'd go with my friends. So today I have expanded slightly, but almost all my meals consist of three things: a protein like chicken or eggs, a vegetable like broccoli, green beans, and a leafy green. Due to concerns about my thyroid condition, I've also integrated a few other foods, but still, almost every single one of my meals is exactly the same. I cook meals in huge batches and then put them in Tupperware to eat throughout the week. It's quick, cost-effective, and extremely healthy. So just find those healthy foods that you like and eat them over and over and over again. Next slide. So I don't really want to discuss the advantages and disadvantages of different diets, but I believe it is worth mentioning eating patterns. Despite popular belief, there is no biological or metabolic advantage to our conventional eating patterns, eating 3 square meals a day. We often hear about the importance of breakfast, but the idea of breakfast is actually a fairly new social construct. It wasn't until about the 18th century in Europe that it actually became customary to eat upon waking up, to break the fast. Similarly, the generally accepted idea that breakfast is the most important meal of the day isn't actually supported by research. If eating 3 square meals a day works for you, then do it. But that isn't necessarily what's ideal for everybody. Some people function better eating more often, eating like 6 small meals a day, others on fewer larger meals. I've struggled with binge eating for most of my life. Like many on the spectrum, I have a tendency to eat very fast, and the mechanisms which regulate my satiety don't quite function correctly. So once I get started, I'll often go through an entire day's worth of food in one sitting. So I found that intermittent fasting works best for me, for my daily schedule and for my overall health.
What do you mean by that? Intermittent?
So intermittent fasting just means not eating for very long periods of time.
Oh,
Okay, I've looked at all the stuff you've shown so far. It appears I may have some of those issues that you put on this board there. So yeah, I obsess about my weight often. I'm always weighing myself on the scale. So much drives me crazy, and so what else can I do? I can only do so much for myself. So right now I find myself mostly pescatarian.
Mm-hmm.
Transition to diet only is necessary on special occasions.
So how I think we all have genetic limitations, but you can only do, I think about it like every action is either promoting health or taking away from it. So if you're eating healthy food, you're promoting health. If you're not eating healthy food, so you can improve yourself, but it may be more difficult for you than others. What works for me doesn't necessarily work for everyone else. So even today, after researching it almost my entire life, I don't even understand how it works with me yet. I'm constantly experimenting to find out what works best for me.
So when you talk about intermittent fasting, you mean like have something in the morning and something at night?
Well, not, I don't quite do it that way. So I actually eat, yeah, I actually eat between 4 and 8 p.m. each day. So between anywhere outside of 4 and 8 p.m., I have no food whatsoever. So the other 20 hours a day, I'm fasting. I'll generally eat 2 large meals during that time period, which is plenty of calories for me for the day. Occasionally, I'll even fast for several days at a time. So I fasted for up to like 3 days, but I mean, humans can survive not eating for months, most of us. As a side benefit, there's a lot of recent evidence in both experimental and clinical studies that intermittent fasting and ketogenic diets may decrease levels of chronic inflammation and improve autism-related behaviors.
What's that diet called again? Explain that one.
So keto, yeah, ketogenic diets. Does anyone?
That's different from just.
Yes.
Oh yes, keto is not good if you do it for a long period of time.
It really depends.
Oh, does it?
Yes, everyone is different. There's people that have been doing it for decades. There's entire cultures that have been doing it for hundreds of years, but it really depends. Yes.
You sort of mentioned in there the inflammation.
Yes.
And so any comments about various antioxidants and things that can be, for example, turmeric is one of the popular ones.
Yeah.
My breakfast smoothie includes blueberries, mixed berries, multiple purple fruits, as well as vegetables and things. How much does that affect or counteract the inflammation?
So what's really frustrating about human physical health is that everyone is different. So you may experience, have great benefits from increasing antioxidant intake. Others may experience none. That's the real problem with, especially with nutrition research. Everybody is completely different. And it's all dependent on like your genetic makeup, your other lifestyle behaviors, even like where your parents came from, where your ancestors came from. These are all various things that go into that. So I think the overall idea that you're including those like healthy whole foods in your diet is a positive, but I couldn't tell you whether or not they're helping actually directly reduce inflammation in you. So since taking up intermittent fasting, I've been able to regulate my intake far more effectively, and my health has improved. It may or may not work for you, but the overriding point is you should experiment to find what specifically works for you. Okay, next. So exercise has very specific implications for those on the autism spectrum, not only for physical health, but also because it's one of the best ways to develop other important life skills. Just like eating, find what you like to do and do it over and over and over again. Just accept that physical activity is an inevitable part of life and it will become part of yours. So I have an hour blocked out on my work calendar that just says gym. So my boss knows that at that hour that I won't be at my desk, that I'll be exercising. Our kids know that before any fun happens on Saturday, the mommy and daddy need to exercise. It's just automated. It's part of my life, like waking up or brushing my teeth. So just accept it and make it part of your life. Next. Yes?
Does your fasting have any impact on your energy for exercise?
So it may have impact on like endurance performance, but I've actually like exercised after fasting for 3 days and felt perfectly fine. I wouldn't do it on a regular basis, but if you're just, I personally have had no problems with it. You don't want to like run a marathon if you're fasting, obviously, because your body's quickest source of energy is glucose, and when you're fasting, you don't have any. So you're not going to do as well, but on a day-to-day basis, if you're not like competing, you should be just fine.
So I find this absolutely fascinating because just last week I was into my doctor, and my Hashimoto's is also a recent diagnosis. And she was showing me several studies, and you're talking about how this autism, the thyroid, the obesity, so I think, okay, those are some of mine that I've handed down. But they're finding that the
Yes.
coming up showing that it's helping. And so I think, well, if those genetic markers are the same, they would have to. But so this is a brand new thing to me. And she gave me a fantastic book called Delay, Don't Deny. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it
No.
has loads of resources. It's one for the layman to read.
Uh-huh,
For those of us
okay.
who didn't go to school to
Okay.
study this. But it also has a whole section of resources that have the science that kind of backs it up. But so it makes me wonder too, because this was a question I was going to call and ask her on Monday. When you say you go to the gym every day, do you do it right before you end your fast or after, or does
So
it matter to you?
It doesn't necessarily matter, but because of my Hashimoto's, it really affects my liver and kidney function if I don't eat shortly after exercising. So
You should exercise
I
shortly
before, and yet my largest meal of the day is generally immediately following.
Okay.
Yeah. So I exercise like later in the afternoon, and then I'll eat at about 4 o'clock.
Okay, because that was a question.
Yeah.
I was reading, I thought, I've got to call her.
Yeah, when I actually got diagnosed, my liver enzymes and my kidney was like the worst that my doctor had ever seen. Like he seriously was like, "You're gonna die. Your kidney, your liver and kidney are shutting down." So that was one of the things I said. You cannot exercise and not eat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Recently, I've developed another furthermore way of losing weight and a new way of dieting. But I know I switched things up a little bit. Recently, when I read something on the internet about how taking a cold bath, like what athletes do for like 10 to 15 minutes, it not only helps them like numb the pain, but somehow it says that when you take a cold bath, it seems to get the brown fats in your body
Yeah.
activated. And so now I've started obsessing about that ever since then. Several weeks ago or something, and now I read on the internet that drinking warm water in the morning seems to like help clear the digestive system, and so now I'm starting to do very similar. He mentioned protein smoothie, right? I use protein smoothie with berries in it and bananas, and so I think you've got the idea.
Yeah, there is some research regarding like cold water and freeing up some of the brown adipose for metabolic things. Yeah,
I
sure.
turn air conditioning on cold,
Yeah, but I think those are all very minute details. She'll tell you I don't take hot baths at all, hot showers at all. I take all cold showers, but there's a number of different reasons for that.
Sometimes what I also do is I drink a protein shake before bed, because I read this all on the internet. Because it said that somehow it helps the muscular things.
Yeah, it directly helps reduce inflammation acutely, but these are very very tiny factors overall.
They're not always statistically true.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the primary markers of those on the autism spectrum is having poor muscular strength and endurance, balance, proprioception, and visual motor control than is typical for their age. So I come from a really athletic family, but growing up, it was really clear that I was naturally less coordinated than my siblings. I simply had to work harder to develop the same level of fitness and skill. But this work paid off in so many different ways. I now have a lifelong love of exercise, fitness, and sports, which actually turned into my career. So they didn't share this passion, and it has negatively impacted their health. So the reality is that exercise isn't just to help your body composition, but it's also helping you develop these different skills that we tend to be delayed in.
I also read that it's not good to exercise before bedtime.
It can
Keep you up.
Yes.
I sometimes have that problem, and I try not to do it. And then sometimes when I find myself exercising, now I'm starting to find myself while I'm trying to fight it, practicing martial arts in my room, my apartment during the night, including specializing in stick-related weapons, and I just can't stop twirling it, and it just gets irritating. And I told myself to go to bed last night and just put it down, and I couldn't get myself to stop it because it just helped. Realized maybe I do have some health issues there. I have insomnia, so I'm suffering very much similarly.
Yeah. You should probably just try to do it at a different time of day because you really need to calm yourself.
But I try not to take that because that could actually hurt me in the future.
Yeah.
What about yoga?
Yeah, yoga's a great way to kind of calm down both physically and emotionally.
That's
So
what I'm gonna do on the next session.
yeah,
There's also Tai Chi, I suggest.
yeah. So something that that slows you down as opposed to kind of gets you amped up. So exercise is also one of the primary ways to develop many of the physical and social skills that are more difficult for us, like locomotor skills, social functioning, and other different skills that we tend to lack. Other studies have shown that exercise has acute benefits specifically related to those with ISD, for instance, helping decrease aggression, off-task behavior, and decreasing elopement. So all of us have our own coping mechanisms. Mine has been for quite a long time exercising, and research provides plenty of evidence that what works for me also pretty much works for everyone else. So I'm sure you all have your own ways of coping, but maybe try exercising next time as opposed to some of these other things. So I could talk all day about the benefits of different exercise modalities, and I'm more than happy to answer questions. But in the real world, the most effective exercise is simply the one that you'll do. The best exercise program in the world has no value if you won't do it. So find what you enjoy doing and focus your efforts on doing it more often, more intensely, and for longer periods of time. If you hate running but like hiking, you live in a great place. Utah has some of the best hiking in the world, so hike. If you prefer outside sports to working out in a gym, join some community sports leagues. Just find out what you like to do. That being said, there is specific benefit to high-intensity exercise. As an exercise scientist, if there's one thing I can say to everybody out there who is frustrated that they don't get the results they want from exercising, it's probably that they aren't doing it hard enough. Physiological progression is based upon the principle of progressive overload. To get bigger, stronger, faster, better conditioned, you have to continually put your body under greater and greater amounts of physiological stress. Exercise should be fun, but it also should be hard. You should be pushing your boundaries often. If you don't, your body has no physiological reason to change. This has both physical and mental health benefits and is especially relevant for those of us on the autism spectrum. High-intensity exercise has been shown in several studies to be one of the best ways to develop specific skills and moderate behaviors characteristic to those on the spectrum. Studies comparing low to high-intensity exercise have found that the greater the intensity, the greater reduction in repetitive and stereotypical behaviors and improvement in motor abilities.
So I guess I have a question about the exercise that I've been doing. Outside of some yoga classes, I tend to bicycle and say once a week, and all last summer, I'll ride my bike for like 5 or 6 hours.
Wow.
But compare that to going to the gym and like lifting weights or doing something that is high intensity versus extended period medium intensity.
So yeah, what research has shown that the high intensity, you're working different energy systems. So you're improving your cardiovascular capabilities, but not so much like increasing muscle mass and
Which I don't want to do.
yeah, which you don't necessarily want to do. But also those things help you maintain your body composition because they increase your metabolism and they have different hormone regulation, which help you improve body composition. So there's kind of it sounds counterintuitive, but endurance activity is actually like counterproductive for keeping your weight down. It can actually be counterproductive.
When you say high intensity, is that what I see sometimes referred to as like HIIT training?
That's one example. It's basically high intensity just means working like up to your max, basically, where you're really giving it all your effort.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
How do you recommend that you
It's some people you'll use heart rate monitors and stuff like that, but simply push yourself as hard as you can. I wouldn't suggest lifting as much weight as you can because there's the possibility you can get hurt. But if you're going to run hard. If you're going to, do some play, don't just kind of go through the motions.
You know, you mentioned something about biking. Now I've upgraded my ability to ride the bike. Now when I ride the bike, I'm always carrying a martial art weapon with me and backpack because I have such high training to go at such a high rate. And so now it's like there's double the obsession there. Now not only am I obsessed with losing weight and exercise, but always carry my Hondo in the back of my back. And I have a lot of obsessions now about certain things about working out. So perhaps I can say something pretty similar to your situation. And I had to stop a few times on the way back from here after visiting ScenicView because there was dark areas. I couldn't see properly. The lights on my bike were low on batteries. So I had to look at my safety too, in spite of all the good exercise.
Mm-hmm.
It's even when I'm going fast, I can't be putting myself unnecessarily at risk. When I have to stop, I have to stop, no matter how good I am.
Mm-hmm. So although difficult, physical activity serves many purposes for those on the spectrum. Along with being one of the foundations of a lifestyle promoting weight management and overall physical health, it is one of the most effective ways to improve motor and social skills. So we have more to gain from exercise than anybody else in every aspect of our overall wellness. So just accept it as part of life and do it. So the importance of sleep is paramount for your health. You can literally survive months without food, but more than 24 hours without sleep can lead to a number of negative consequences. Like every other lifestyle behavior, healthy sleep begins with routine. Automating the behavior so you're doing the same thing every single day. One of the first things you find out as a parent is the importance of sleep routines for children. It's fascinating that we lose some of this as we get older. Luckily, those on the spectrum are inherently great at routine. So go to bed at the same time, in the same environment, every single night, and eventually you'll just do it without thinking. Some things that have worked for us are turning off all the lights later in the evening, so not keeping the lights on as it gets later. Blackout curtains, setting a specific time to wind down physically, and we diffuse essential oils, which has also helped us. So. If you Google sleep routine, the first thing you're going to see are references to screen time. While I am human and our lives include plenty of screen time, this has become one of the health concepts that I've become really passionate about learning and educating about. Blue light is a visible light ranging from 380 to 500 nanometers, which is considered high energy visible. It is the range of light that's primarily emitted from screens like phones, TVs. Research has shown that natural exposure to blue light during the day may actually boost energy, alertness, and improve mood. And contrary to popular belief, it doesn't have any negative impact on the health of your eyes. But synthetic blue light from screens, especially during the evenings, can have a negative impact on circadian rhythms and can disrupt one's ability to get to sleep, to stay asleep, and to wake up refreshed. If there's one tip I can give about getting good sleep, it is to put the phone away. Set a time and put all devices away. Lock it up or put it in another room so you can't even touch it. If you still find your mind wandering, pick up a book or briefly remove yourself from the environment, but don't pick up a screen.
Question.
Yes.
Why is it that sometimes when I'm, like, for instance, there's a certain game that I will play on my little Game Boy Advance or whatever, every time I play it within 5 minutes I'm out.
Wow.
I kid you not, like when I'm literally in bed and I'm playing that, I'm out within 5 minutes of starting to play that game. It is so weird.
So I have a question for you. How is your sleep when you go out from after doing that compared to your sleep if you don't? Because I have a very similar issue.
Well, I don't know that I haven't evaluated it, but I'm probably going to actually now. why is yours a lot less, or is it
There's something that there is a game that I'll play that I frequently will fall asleep
playing?
during, and I don't know that I get as much sleep than, or whether it's as
Deep?
healthy, as deep or healthy for me as other times, if instead I read a book or.
Right.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Like, the reality is that we all have to figure out what works for us. If playing some specific video game helps you get to sleep, then it helps you get to sleep.
It's
You know, and
very
that's a good thing.
specific one. It's so weird. Any other game, it will keep me up.
Yeah,
But just that one game, it's just,
it's interesting.
yeah.
So as you have found out, I know all about the problems, but I don't necessarily have all the solutions. The more I learn about health, the more I've come to see the gaps in my own understanding and the realization that everybody has to find their own path. Your path may be different than mine, but the fundamentals are always the same. Healthy eating behaviors, prioritizing physical activity, and developing healthy sleep routines. If you get those figured out, improved physical health is the unavoidable positive byproduct. So I'm all about mindset. How you view and attack the world greatly determines your outcomes. I have a saying that I use in a lot of my professional presentations. Every day, every meal, every workout, and every night's sleep is an opportunity to improve your health. The mindset you need to optimize health is to examine every action and decide if it's going to make you better or make you worse. You're not going to be perfect, but strive to perform more actions that promote health than are a detriment to them, and you'll constantly improve. Unfortunately, as I found in my research, when it comes to physical health and managing weight, us on the spectrum have the odds stacked against us. But we also have one major advantage, our superpower, routine. Prioritize eating healthy, regular exercise, and consistent sleep patterns, and nothing can stop you from becoming a health superhero. Thank you.